Okay. All right, let's see. Hello, everyone. Hello. Alex here. Um, we are in second class on Titanic. And let me just get to my YouTube channel on my phone so I can check your guys' comments while I do this, because unfortunately I don't have two screens, one for a game and one for looking at people's comments. But let's see, there we are. And then turn the volume down. All right. So we got Moonzer. Hello, Moonzer. Hello, Evan. Hello, Mark and Kevin. Um, Thomas. I saw Thomas. Historic Productions. Hello. All right. Let's see. Put the phone down, and we'll kind of wander around here. So I figure we almost rarely see second class whenever I do these things. So I thought I'd probably start in second class and see where we go from here. Um, and for those of you who are new, I will probably start, like when I'm talking about things, I might be comparing them to the RMS Queen Mary. And that's because I'm not really any kind of expert or knowledgeable about Titanic at all. All my knowledge is pretty much solely in the Queen Mary, and there actually are a lot of comparisons to make between the two ships when it comes to, you know, things that are similar and then things that are different. So, but let's continue on into the lounge here. This, I think, is technically called the library, but the thing is that it was mainly used as a lounge for second class passengers of Titanic. So this is kind of one of the areas I like more. I don't know that I would say it's not one of my favorite areas, but it is very, very nice. It's the kind of place that I could see myself kind of relaxing and enjoying the atmosphere. So yeah, and one of the things I really like though is the marquetry panels on the walls. I'm always a big fan of marquetry, and we can kind of see two different tones here. Looks like the same wood, just two different tones. Some kind of maple, it looks like. Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's good to see you all. Um, Let me restart the chat because it looks like the chat just kind of slowed down. Oh, no, it's just slow. Okay. Hello. All right, now if we go out this other door here, this is the aft second class staircase. There's the they call that the main mast, so that's the main mast there. And the mast, it has to go through several different levels on a ship, really, to maintain stability. If it was only attached to the very upper surface of the ship, then high winds could rip it off of the ship. So, oh, Moonzer says it's his. Oh, hello, happy birthday, Moonzer! Awesome. Let's go down a level. I'm going to try to move this camera as smooth as I can so I don't get people all motion sick, which can tend to happen when people play this game. So, yeah, this is the second class dining saloon, and it's all set up for probably lunch service or dinner service. And it's interesting because I think just the way it's decorated, I like the second class dining saloon more than I like the first class dining saloon on Titanic, at least. But one of the key interesting things I find about Titanic is that there aren't too many places on the ship. In fact, I can only think of two places on the ship where the the room spans multiple decks. And really that would be the two grand staircases up on A and B decks. And so those are really the only ones I can think of where you might see a space taking up two different decks. But on the Queen Mary, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of spaces that take up two levels. And it was to give everything more of a ceiling height. Now, what's interesting about Titanic and Queen Mary at the same time, probably true for a lot of ships, honestly, is that the level on the ship with all the restaurants, so, well, these would be dining saloons in this time, but it's true for Titanic. This level on the ship, which, let me actually check what level we're on. D deck, okay. Yeah, D deck on Titanic is extra tall. So these ceilings are actually taller than the deck above and the deck below. And that's specifically because D deck is where the dining saloons were, at least for first and second class. So it's the same thing on Queen Mary, where our deck is the restaurant deck, and there are all three classes have their own restaurants on that deck, and the deck height is taller than usual. But even then, the first class dining room has a dome, as they call it, that is an extra 2 decks taller. So for a grand total of 3, a height of 3 decks. Now we should be on E deck, and this is the second class stewards, second class stewards office. Chief steward, I think it would be called chief steward. Let me check the comments real quick. Hello, everyone. Let's see. Everyone's wishing Moonzer a happy birthday. Mark says, I like the second class dining room. The first class is too white. I agree. I'm not personally a fan of all the white painted wood. It's okay as accents and in certain areas and stuff, you know, like this little corner here is kind of nice because you got the wood paneling on one side and the wood paneling on the other is painted. So it does kind of look nice in that way, but I don't like a room that is made entirely of wood panels that's been completely painted white. I just don't like that. Hello, Ozzy. Thank you so much for upgrading. How is the weather today? High right now of 55 in Fort Mojave, Arizona. Did have snow, didn't stay long. Oh, okay. Yeah, the weather's been actually pretty normal here. Normal temperatures, rain, that kind of thing. Nothing out of the ordinary. We kind of I kind of wish there was more snow up here, but there wasn't. My friend in Idaho got some snow, but yeah, here it's just, you know. All right, so I've gone into there many times, so I don't want to bore you guys with that again, but there are more places in second class I could go, and I think I have to go up to get there. So this is the dining saloon. I have to go up again, and we get to the second class library, which we were just in. So I have to go up again, but I think this level also has the lift. So this is the second class lift. And it's actually kind of like the Queen Mary in certain ways because there is a staircase. It's the aft second class staircase on Queen Mary, and it's just like this. There's a single lift in the center, and there is, you know, a staircase on either side, one going down, one going up. And so there's kind of a similarity there. Wait, what's that? Oh yeah, maybe I should show you guys this. This is another similarity between the Queen Mary and Titanic, although you can't see it today. But there is a sheltered promenade on Titanic that goes from port to starboard and starboard to port, either way. But there's this passageway between these two steel bulkheads, and there's one just like this on Queen Mary, although on Queen Mary today, it's been blocked off and turned into kind of a long, like, closet, like a janitor's closet. And so you can't really see it, but it's on main deck when you go aft towards today they call it the Britannia Salon, but it was the second class main lounge, and it was just like this. And what they've done with the main lounge is they've incorporated this sheltered promenade into the main lounge space. And so whenever you book the Britannia Salon, you also get the fully carpeted sheltered promenade. And but the way you get there, you have to cross over this little hallway thing. And just like on Titanic, on Queen Mary is the same thing. If you kept going aft on the sheltered promenade, you'd get to a bulkhead here, which of course, divided the space. And if you went outside, then you would get to a large open space for second class passengers to kind of just relax and take the air. So, okay, what was the... I was going to go up one more. If this is... What deck is this? I don't even remember. I know the next deck up has to be the boat deck. No, it's not. Okay. All right. Sometimes I get lost. I mean, honestly, it's actually been a while since I played this game. And so I can kind of forget how to get places sometimes. But yeah, for some reason there was a separate house for this level of the staircase. But I think that's because this is also a sheltered promenade. So does it go? It should. Okay, so yeah, the second class passengers, if they weren't on a sheltered promenade below, then they can come up here and I'll just show you. You could walk through the lobby or foyer. This is a British ship, so foyer into the other side, and then you could continue on this way. There's the very aft of the ship back there. And then you could either cross through the staircase or use this little passageway here to get to the other side. So you see it creates like a loop that allows them to kind of walk around and around in circles. It's not a very long walk, but here is the second class smoking room, only available to men on Titanic. And we got some kind of linoleum floors here. Now, linoleum was a popular product to use on ocean liners in the early 20th century. It was kind of one of those miracle materials that I call them, because they were entirely, well, mostly naturally, well, made from natural products. So linseed oil that was kind of processed and dried and then turned into these, I mean, it's a kind of a long process to describe. But anyway, that's what linoleum is made from, linseed oil. And so it's actually biodegradable, very safe, anti, what's the word? Hypoallergenic, antibacterial, all that kind of, it's crazy. Linoleum has so many benefits. It's also lightweight, which allows it to be put on ships like this. And pound for pound, it was much lighter than putting real tile on the floor. Now, I can't say with all certainty that this isn't tile, because I'm not really much of a Titanic expert, but my bet would be on linoleum. I do know that Titanic did have linoleum. I know that this red tile work here is linoleum, so this has to be linoleum too. And there were different kinds of linoleum. On Queen Mary, they used a lot of corkoleum and corkoid. And corkoid was more of a plastic type of linoleum, and corkoleum was the linseed oil linoleum. And then there was rubbleum too, which was made mostly of rubber. So you can learn all about that stuff on my website, RMSQM Wiki, and the link for that is in the description below. So you can actually like go there. But I have a website all about Queen Mary. Everything from the history to the engineering to the interior design, all that stuff I just talked about, linoleum, you can learn all about that there on the RMS QM Wiki website. So yeah, just a little plug in there. I did work really hard on that website. It was a group effort actually from me and my friends, and and Shiloh Svoboda, one of my good friends here who helped teach me a lot about the Queen Mary in the early days and still does today. He helped work on that for, oh my gosh, I don't even remember how long we've been working on that, but yeah. So it's been very much of a passion project. But there's a lot of parallels. So I know if there's a lot of you who are like, oh, I'm really more of a Titanic fan, I don't need to see the website. But the thing is that there's a lot of parallels, and there's a lot of things you can learn from ocean liners in general just from the website. All right, so let's see. We've pretty much seen... Have we? Well, kind of. We've pretty much seen all the second class spaces. I suppose we can go up to the top level, since we're still in second class. All right, we'll go through here, because the forward second class staircase is the one that goes all the way up to the boat deck. But we have to pass through, I believe this is A deck. I don't remember. Yeah, A deck. So we have to pass through A deck, which doesn't really have an outlet for second class passengers. And then up to the boat deck. On Queen Mary, the boat deck is, technically called the sun deck, because there are no boats sitting on the boat deck. They are suspended in the air. But yeah, this is Titanic's boat deck. And there were 16 of these wooden clinker-built lifeboats, and then 4 collapsible lifeboats. I forget the maker, but that's also on my website. Yeah, so let's see. And we can see the aft of the ship from here. And we can explore other areas of the ship as well. Let me check the comments real quick. Hello, Emma. Moonzer says, please turn slow mode off. No, I can't do that because I can't keep up with the comments. And whenever I can't keep up with the comments, people get really angry at me. Hello from Chicago. This is from Riley. Hello from Chicago. It's windy, warm, 55 degrees Fahrenheit in January. It's beautiful. I have been the Titanical Historical Society for over 20 years, but just found your channel. Can you tell of what happens to the pets? I don't know about what happens to the pets, but I can show you where the dog kennels on Titanic are. There we are. I forgot it was in the second class area. So this here is Titanic's dog kennels. I don't think we'll be able to see much. Oh, well, you can kind of see the steel crates right there. And if I go to this side and turn here, you can kind of see the steel steel crates there. So it looks like there was a capacity, well, at least in this image that we see, capacity for about 12 dogs or cats. So I know that if Titanic had actually had a long career, there probably would have been a number of different animals that the ship carried. People were mostly into dogs at the time, but cats were becoming popular. Well, no, they were kind of already popular at that point. What is that? I have just barely noticed that wooden beam. I'm going to take a wild guess here because I don't know for sure, but I'm going to guess that's a stack of lumber designed for moving. No, that can't be because the collapsibles are near the other funnels and they wouldn't walk them that far. I actually don't know what those wooden beams are for, or boards. Huh. Okay, just reading some comments here. All right. So where do you guys think we should go next? Usually I follow your guys's instruction because I know you guys want to see certain places on the ship, and believe me, there is a lot of places on the ship that we can go. It is incredible, and we couldn't possibly see it all in one sitting unless I was here for like 6 hours at least. That's how much there is to see on the ship right now. It would take us forever. People are coming up with some silly responses. Maybe it's a walking plank. Yeah, no, it's definitely for something. Everything on a ship serves a purpose. That's the interesting thing about ships, is that every space, every nook, every cranny, everything that's been loaded on board does a job, and it does it very well. That's one of those cool things about ships. Mark says, go to the third class smoking room. Okay. Let's go down the stairs. And there we go. Is this the level that I could... Pretty sure. Yeah, there we go. So in this demo, you have to kind of load into everything. So I'm going to press F. And what will happen is we'll load into the third class areas, but you'll see that, see, I'm still at the top of the staircase, but this time I'm on the other side of the gate. So still in the same area. That's one of the things I like about this, is it helps the game to load faster. But yeah. So this here is a third class smoking room. You can see it's pretty hazy with this the cigars and cigarettes and things. Who is this? What was this person reading? I can't tell from here. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. If I know correctly, the walls are oak. Oak. Oh, excuse me. And the benches, well, they have to be like a dark oak, I think. But yeah, oak everywhere. There was there was birds on board the Titanic. Uh, if there were, they were either for eating or they were stowaway birds, which often happens actually on ocean liners. Birds kind of nest somewhere and then they, yeah, they stay along for the ride. That happened on the Queen Mary, especially. There's a funny story of it happening on the Queen Mary's last great cruise as she went from Southampton to Long Beach. A bird had boarded somewhere, I think near the Canary Islands, and as they were crossing the ocean to get to Rio de Janeiro, the bird just had to kind of sit there and nest, and it was kind of funny, and the bird kind of took off when they got to the other side of the Atlantic, and yeah, it's kind of funny. You have to wonder what happened to that bird, but yeah, it was released into the wild. So this is the third class lounge. It looks, I mean, structurally identical to the smoking room, but this is where passengers would have just been able to play games and chat and relax. It's just an open space. It's interesting because, well, why don't we explore some third class spaces while we're here? I was talking, well, not talking, but I mean, somebody commented on one of my videos the other day. It was a tour of the Queen Mary. I did a video where I basically gave an entire virtual tour of the Queen Mary, and it's really cool if you want to see it. But the person was like, "Oh, I expected the ship to be much more beautiful than this," and they were talking about how there was no decoration anywhere, and Art Deco isn't really that interesting, and something like that. And I'm just like, what is this person talking about? Like, I get if you're not a fan of Art Deco. The Queen Mary is entirely British Art Deco, which is a very subtle style of Art Deco. And I will admit, it is subtle. It's not like walking, into the Chrysler Building or something where everything is, you know, covered in chrome and it's gilded and stuff like that. It's a very subtle style of Art Deco, and Queen Mary is entirely decorated with the exotic wood paneling. You got stuff from all over the world. You got Brazilian peroba wood. You've got African zebrano. You got Macassar ebony. It's just like all kinds of crazy wood. And this person's like, all the wood looks the same. I'm like, it certainly does not look the same. Like, you can have your opinions about what you think of the Art Deco style, because, you're allowed to think what you want about Art Deco. We're still in third class, by the way. But to look at these different wood styles and then say they all look the same, no. That there tells me that this person just doesn't appreciate differences in art mediums and stuff like that. Here's a third class cabin, and third class cabins on Queen Mary were very similar as well. They basically consisted of the exact same thing: two bunk beds, I don't know, berths, I guess you would call them, a sink, and except on Queen Mary there would have been space. There would have been a bit more space than this, and there would have been a chair for you to sit on, put your shoes on, stuff like that. And then, of course, on Queen Mary, they wouldn't have had, I don't know what you call these, but I just call them like open space ceilings. This was to allow for ventilation, because on Titanic, they didn't pump the air into each room individually. Instead, they'd pump the fresh air into just a general space like this, and then it would flow in and out of the room via the upper ceiling area. This would definitely be a no-no today on a cruise ship, for instance, because someone in the next cabin they could very easily just, you know, sneak a camera right over the top and, you know. But yeah, yeah, but those wood slats that you see there. Oh, I can walk in. Oh, I forgot. That's kind of cool. Little white star blanket. But the wood slats that I was just showing you on the ceiling, that I mean, I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure I am because there's a light bulb right there. But generally, when you see wood slats like that on the ceiling of an ocean liner, it means that something could be stored up there. So maybe that's where baggage could have been. Although the light bulb being right there would have made it very dangerous to store baggage up there. So it's interesting. But there maybe life belts. But yeah, still the light bulb is right there. I don't know, but usually that's what it means. That's a storage area. So here's one of the, what do you call them? The cargo hold hatches. And so, yeah, you can kind of see that it's got these boards that they can just lay down. So they can deck each area over to create even more floor space for storing baggage. All right. Oh, I just had to take a second look at these doorknobs because I realized that they're this almost the same shape as the ones on Queen Mary. I was like, whoa, wait, hold on. Yeah, the ones on Queen Mary aren't quite as long, you know, because these are very, very oval. But the ones on Queen Mary are slightly more rounded. But the ones on Queen Mary are not made of metal. They are made of Roanoid, another miracle material. Roanoid is actually very interesting because it is made of bakelite and it is designed to... Did I go over here? I'm pretty sure I did. Roanoid is designed to not feel cold or warm to the touch. It can withstand almost anything you throw at it. It will never lose its polish. It will never blister from heat, and it does not burn. It could melt under extreme temperatures, but by then the ship would already be gone. So, all right. So we saw that. This, I think I was showing you earlier, is like a steward pantry. Here's a map of all the different levels. So everything in, well, I mean, this is technically pink, but you know, pink and salmon colors, but the darkest pink color are areas that we can walk on the ship, and then the lighter pinkish areas are things that we can see from certain vantage points, and everything else is stuff that we can't really see. Someone says that the slats were for washing room laundry. I mean, that's true too. You know, if you needed to quickly wash something, maybe you had a scarf and you got some food on your scarf, then you could wash it and then hang it up on one of the slats on the ceiling. So that's definitely a possibility. Also for rags, although I think the stewards would just change out your rags if you were using one and then soiled it and then needed it to be changed out. The steward would just change it out. But some people are weird. Some people, they insist on doing a lot of stuff themselves, even though the hotel will take care of it for them. I speak from experience working at hotels and stuff. I'll be really surprised how people will... They have the ability to have something changed out for them, but then they want to keep it and do it themselves, and you're just like, what? So here's another passage that it'd be kind of cool one day if we get to explore this area. I mean, it's all the same stuff. You just go through here, and there's probably, you know, cabins down there and stuff like that. But Still, it's fun. And that looks like a lift shaft. I never noticed that before. That's interesting. I wasn't aware that there was a lift over here. And this door, the way that the hinges are, and then the door handle itself, that's not an ordinary door. That might be like a food pantry. That's interesting. Okay, that I did not expect. Beyond these doors is second class. We were already on this level. But if we continue forward, we're on Scotland Road, and Scotland Road was shared between crew and second class. Now on Queen Mary had a similar, these are called working alleys. So this is for crew to get back and forth on one side of the ship to the other, but on Titanic, third class used it as well. But Queen Mary had a working alley. It was called Burma Road, and it was only for crew, and it ran along the port side of the ship almost entirely from bow to stern, almost. Somebody says that door leads to a pantry full of potatoes. That's why there's a bag of potatoes in front. I mean, yeah, I assumed that there was a reason why there were potatoes there, but it's just sometimes you find stuff in this game and it's like, you know, like a bucket of paint, and it's sitting in front of like an area that it doesn't really belong. You'll see as we get into these engine rooms. We're going into the aft engine room of Titanic. It's got an air ventilation shaft which goes all the way to the top surface of the ship to allow hot air to escape. But down below us would be where the trying to think, the turbine engine would be. We got a little storage area here, and we can't really explore this place too much. Sorry, it's kind of a maze. I can only go, see, there's a bucket here. I can only go down as far as this bucket. But from here we can kind of see some, so that's a pump down there. Yeah, it's a 2-cylinder pump. And then what we can't see very well because it's obscured by all this structural steel is right below us, right in front of the camera, beyond the structural steel, is the turbine, which ran off of 9 psi of exhausted steam from the main engines in the forward engine room. But we're in the after engine room, and these are some condensers that the steam goes through. They look a lot like Queen Mary's condensers. I think that's because, you know, in the 24 years that passed between the two ships, some of the technology really didn't need improving. Some of the technology was, you know, at its peak already. So sometimes you get stuff like that. But these are massive valves that can either force the steam into the turbine. Sorry, I had to think for a minute there. Force the steam into the turbine, or the valve could be reorganized to just vent the steam directly into the condenser for it to be condensed back into water. So it wasn't always necessary to run the turbine. And we'll continue on to the main engine room, which is just beyond the other bulkhead. This is one of the highlights of this demo, is because you can see the engines moving. So we're sitting at the top of the port side engine. These are the caps of the cylinders, this giant round thing here. Caps of the cylinders. And we can only go so far. As you can see, buckets block our way. But it's a large room. Again, a large ventilation shaft that allows hot air to rise out of the room. Down below us are the engines. We'll get down there in a second. Mr. Golden V asks how much Queen Mary would cost to build today. Oh, I don't know. It would cost more, or it would cost, actually not more, but it would cost just as much as building one of those massive is it Royal Caribbean that does it? The most recent one is Icon of the Seas. I don't remember what cruise ship company does that one, but it would probably cost as much as like Icon of the Seas. I know people are like, what? That's not possible. But actually it is. The materials used on Queen Mary today, particularly the exotic and extinct woods, can cost a lot of money. They recently, in the last decade or so, they needed to replace a 4x8 sheet of one of Queen Mary's veneers, and I forget. I think it was macaw, the wood type, but it was a very rare piece of wood, and it had to look a certain way because the one on Queen Mary, they when they cut the woods on for Queen Mary, a lot of the forests and things that they got that wood from were still pretty much intact. So there were a lot of fantastic examples of each type of wood. But today, even if you were to find that same wood, all the best examples have been taken already and cut down. So to be able to find something that matches the quality of the woods on Queen Mary is also difficult. They ended up spending something like $8,000 for a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet of that type of wood, and it still didn't really match the kind of wood that was on Queen Mary, even though it was the same kind of the same species of wood. And so when you think about it, if you tried to replace all those exotic wood veneers on Queen Mary and build it all from scratch, I mean, we are talking just hundreds of millions of dollars. Not to mention there are a lot of other materials too that are on the ship. I mean, there's a whole lot of mother of pearl formica. So it's not real mother of pearl, it's formica. But you don't see a lot of mother of pearl formica being manufactured anymore. They still make formica, but just different styles of it. And you'd have to get a company to start manufacturing you a lot of mother of pearl formica to be used in a lot of the ship's bathrooms and things like that. So yeah, if they were to try to rebuild Queen Mary again today, it would probably cost just as much as one of those giant like Icon of the Seas ships, just because of all the sheer materials that have to be custom made or found, depending on where they are. So let's see here. Yeah, somebody said it was Royal Caribbean. Yeah. Someone says labor costs because it's riveted. Yeah, that's true. It is riveted. Ozzy Madero says, what kind of wood was on the Queen Mary? Oh my gosh, there were 56 different types of rare and exotic woods on Queen Mary. 56. I can't name them all for you because, frankly, I can't memorize them all. But good news is, on my website, RMSQM Wiki, which the link is in the description below, there is a page on the interior design page that shows all the names of all 56 different types of wood. I can only name like maybe 10 of them for you, honestly. That's as many as I can memorize. It's a lot of different kinds of wood. Like I said, there's zebrano, there's macaw, there's macassar ebony, there's 3 different types of maple. There's quilted maple, there's what do you call it? Maple burr. There's regular maple. There's let me think. There is I'm trying to think what's another kind of wood I can remember. There's a very rare type of wood that was used in the observation bar that was technically a hybrid between a cedar and mahogany tree. And the thing is that, while there does still exist hybrids of cedar and mahogany, this was a very unique tree. I mean, it was just like the carpenters didn't even, it was so beautiful. They gave it its own nickname. They called it cedar maw. And that's a type of tree that, we'll probably never ever see again. And so, yeah, there are just a lot of different types of woods. My favorite one on the ship being quilted maple, because it looks like sheets of satin. Like if you were to lay down satin sheets and you could see all the little ripples and wrinkles in the satin, and it's all catching the light in a glittery way, that's what quilted maple looks like. It is the coolest look. It looks three-dimensional, like you want to touch it and see if it actually feels wavy, but it's not. It's just, it catches the light a certain way, and it almost glitters when it catches the light. It's just a beautiful type of wood. And Queen Mary had some of the best examples ever found of quilted maple. I mean, even to this day, when they go looking for extra sheets of quilted maple to replace, ones that are damaged, they can't find the same quality anymore. It just doesn't exist. His Majesty the King. Yeah, we are in the engineers' mess hall. So yeah, you can find all that information about Queen Mary on my website, RMSQM Wiki. Link is in the description below. But there's all kinds of stuff you can learn about ships on that one. So this is the part of Scotland Road that everybody remembers, because it's like the largest, widest path of all the paths on Scotland Road. Walnut looks nice, polished up, but honestly, my favorite would be like walnut burr, because regular walnut to me doesn't look that interesting. It's just like for instance, my grandfather, he had his house was very 1970s. It was last decorated in the 1970s, and all his walls had vertical panels. So it's like this 1970s style vertical panels, and they were all walnut panels. And as much as I appreciate the attempt at wood paneling the room, it was very boring looking. It was just a very, I describe it as a depressing brown color. And the wood grain was very, just, it's the picture of wood grain. It's like what you imagine, like when someone says, "Oh, this is made of wood," and you picture wood grain. That's what it looks like. There was nothing special about it. And so regular walnut to me is not interesting. By the way, we are in the third class dining saloon. But yeah, regular walnut doesn't look that interesting to me, but walnut burr looks amazing. It is some of the coolest looking wood you'll ever find. And there was a lot of walnut burr on Queen Mary, although you'd be hard pressed to find it today. But yeah, I'm trying to think. Oh, elm. In Queen Mary's lifts, the first class lifts, they were covered in elm burr, which looks like the surface of the sun. That's what's so cool about it. Elm burr looks like the surface of the sun, all roiling, boiling with huge explosions. And that's what it looks like. It's so cool. Another really cool wood on the Queen Mary is tiger oak, which normally when you get tiger oak, what looks so cool about it is it looks like it has tiger stripes. And that's why people like it. But the tiger oak that they got for the Queen Mary also there were some really rare knots and burrs in the wood that made it so the tiger oak kind of had faces in them. Now, it was also partly due to the carpenters laying the veneers in a certain pattern. No, I better not describe it. It might just take too much time. But they laid the veneers in a certain pattern, so that way it created these tiger faces in the wood, and it looks so cool when you walk up to it, because you could swear that, it's like someone like painted a tiger face into the wood, but it's not. It's the natural wood grain, just laid out into that pattern. It's basically just the same sheet of wood cut into 4 pieces and then laid out in a clockwise pattern. It's interesting. But yeah. So here is one of the steward's lavies. Lots of sinks for, they needed to get dressed and prepared in the morning, but here's urinals. And then some large sinks. I'm guessing this is actually more for mopping and stuff like that. But these sinks here were for getting ready, shaving, doing all that kind of stuff. Then the toilets were back here. Multiple toilets. It's the same thing you'd find on Queen Mary as well. When you went to like some of the steward's space, there was one really large steward's lavy area at the very, very stern of the ship. I want to say B deck. I want to say B deck, but I don't remember. No, couldn't have been B deck. C deck? No, R deck. R deck. Yes, R deck. Sorry about that. Had to really think about that for a second. There was a huge steward's lavy area. We're talking like 12 different toilets lined up in a row, and lots of sinks, lots of showers. Yeah, that's something you actually don't see here. There's toilets, there's sinks and urinals, but no showers. This one's bigger than the others. I just realized that. But I'm sure they would have had showers somewhere. Would it have been this one? Well, no, this is I meant the other one. Well, anyway, this is where some of the stewards slept. And it was like this on Queen Mary as well. They had all these bunks. You really had no privacy, honestly. And in some ways, it's still like that today on cruise ships. In some ways, but I mean, you're put into smaller rooms that you share with like 3 people. But okay, I don't know for certain, but I mean, it says lavatory, like lavy. I can't get in here, but there's got to be a room here somewhere with showers, and I'm thinking it might be this one, but I don't know. I can't say for certain. But anyway, shall we continue to the boiler rooms? Boiler rooms, anyone? Hello, Lori. King of Battleships says, can you walk down Queen Mary's working alleyways today? No. First of all, that working alleyways on Queen Mary were on C deck, and half of C deck was entirely removed to create some of the exhibit hall spaces. So there's only half of C deck still around, and it's the forward half. And on the forward half, they use the working alley as, offices, honestly. So you can walk, well, not you, but an employee could walk down the working alley to get to several different offices that used to be places like the printing room, for instance. But yeah, regular people cannot walk down the working alleys on Queen Mary. So we're in one of the boiler rooms. Basically, right below us, this diagonal, ventilation shaft, that's where all the smoke and gases, the exhausts, are going up this vent all the way to the top, and there'll be a funnel at the very top. But we're in the air shaft, and the air shaft helps move hot air from the boiler room in general up and out of the ship, so it doesn't build up, and helps keep this space from getting too hot. But that being said, it still got very hot, probably at least 120 degrees Fahrenheit, because we have literally a bunch of fires burning in a very small amount of space. So all these furnaces and things set alight. So we'll continue down a bit further. We can see coal piled up on the deck. Almost said floor, but people would go crazy with me if I said floor. On the deck. There's an example of one of the furnaces. Now, Queen Mary, see, these are double-ended Scotch boilers with 3 furnaces on each side. That's what makes them double-ended, is because the other side would have a furnace on it. But these ones are fed with coal, and they are, and the air. Sorry. Oh my gosh. But the air that they need to burn a flame comes from the surrounding air of the room, and as the heat gets generated and the heat rises out of the exhaust ventilation of the boiler, it sucks in air from the room and pulls it in, and that's how it maintains a fire. On the Queen Mary is a little bit different. The Queen Mary did have 3 double-ended Scotch boilers, but Queen Mary's Scotch boilers ran off of fuel oil, so it was number 6 Bunker C fuel oil, and they were forced draft boilers, and each boiler had 8 furnaces total, so 4 on one side, 4 on the other. But forced draft means that instead of just allowing the rising heat to pull air into the furnace, which keeps the fire going, instead there would be a second, this wall we're looking at of black steel. That's the exhaust, but there would have been a second one in front of it that came all the way down into the front of the furnaces, and that would force fresh air into the furnace. And that forced air not only prevented any of the soot and dangerous gases from filling the room like it would here, but it also helped the fire to burn hotter because, more oxygen, bigger fire. But the interesting thing was those 3 Scotch boilers that Queen Mary had were only for running the hotel services. So when it came to powering the engines of the ship, you had 24 Yarrow boilers, which were different than Scotch boilers. They were a water tube type, so water ran through tubes and hot gases and air flowed around the tubes and caused the water to boil. Anyway, the Yarrow boilers were also forced draft boilers. The oil burning furnaces needed to have air forced into them. But the difference was that the Yarrow boiler rooms were sealed off and pressurized. So you would have to pass through an airlock to get into the Yarrow boiler rooms. And the Yarrow boiler rooms are pressurized like an airplane cabin to force air into all the furnaces. And yeah, that's how that worked. So it's interesting that there's differences. I can't really see very well. But this is one of the coal bunkers on Titanic. This is one of the ones that runs, they have a word for what direction it goes, but I can't remember the word. It's a very specific word. But yeah, it goes from port to starboard, starboard to port kind of thing. And it was filled with coal all the way to the very top, and even then the very top goes over the boiler room to the other side. And so let me shrink down to get back out here. So yeah, literally um, yeah, that's, you see that that wall that makes a 90-degree angle and turns into a ceiling on that side. That is part of the coal bunker, and it was filled with coal and would go all the way to the other side of the boiler room and then connect to the other coal bunker. So yeah. And some people think that the coal bunkers themselves had watertight bulkheads. Now, this bulkhead here is not a watertight bulkhead, but if we were to go inside the coal bunker, this bulkhead is a watertight bulkhead. So there was a watertight bulkhead separating each of the paired up bunkers from each other, but the steel wall that faced the inside of the boiler room itself was not watertight. So people will often go like, oh, Titanic had, 16 watertight compartments, but the coal bunkers also served as watertight compartments. And it's like, no, they didn't. And that's the reason why. Yeah, so we're in kind of like a little in-between space here. Trying to think if we should just proceed forward. Yeah, let's just proceed forward. We'll go to the crew areas. Forward on the ship. All right, let's see. Reading some people's comments here. Mr. Golden Bee says, I thought lavvy was only a Scottish word. We certainly don't use lavatory or lavvy in the United States at all. We certainly don't. But we know what it means. Well, most of us do. But it's not only a Scottish word. They use it in the rest of England and stuff like that too. So, but yeah, it's we know what it means, but we just don't use it here in the United States. We don't even say toilet when referring to bathrooms. Like we call them bathrooms, even if there's no bath inside. And so it can be kind of confusing for my viewers, because when I talk about these ocean liners, and I tell them, oh, you might have your own private toilet, but you don't have your own private bathroom, and a lot of my American viewers might be a bit confused by that. They might go, what? How is that possible? Because we always think of a bathroom as a place that has a toilet and a bath. But on these old ocean liners, they separated them. So there would be rooms specifically for baths, and then there would be rooms for toilets. And people from Europe are pretty used to, clarifying the difference between the two. They know the difference between the two. So yeah, that's one of those language barrier things that can kind of confuse people from the United States. Yeah, so that's a cargo hold. Every time I go on this game, I explore the cargo hold, and this time I'm like, I'm not gonna do it, because it's just, I do it every time. All right, so we're in one of the forward areas where there were crew. I think this is fireman crew, so people who worked in the boiler rooms. Some people, who talk about Titanic and they say like, oh, well, the ship would have survived if they had just hit the iceberg head on. And true, maybe the ship wouldn't have sank if it was done that way. But the difference is all these men slept in the forward areas. Even on Queen Mary, it was the same way. The men slept in the forward areas like this. We are near the very bow of the ship. Very near to it. There's only, beyond this wall, I believe, is the chain locker. So it's, the bulkhead there at the very end. Beyond that's the chain locker. So there really isn't much more space forward of this. These men would have been killed. So you would have really had to consider, you know, and I'm sure uh, Officer Murdoch, who was the one that gave the commands for steering the ship around the iceberg, had really thought of that too. He thought, should I just ram it head on? And he wanted to take the risk of going around the iceberg to prevent any loss of life. And that was kind of his decision. So when people say like, oh, why didn't he just ram it head on? The ship would have survived. It's like, well, because he really had to consider, like, should he kill a bunch of people over something that he might be able to prevent? And he honestly thought, if I could just steer the ship around this iceberg, we can prevent any loss of life. Unfortunately, that wasn't, the best decision either. It was really an impossible situation. So it's hard to put any blame for how the ship should have steered around the iceberg in that sense, because when you're put into a tough spot like that, you can't just declare, oh, it's time to kill some people off. So and then down here is the chain locker. Might as well jump in. So as you can see, there were 2 chains, one for each bow anchor. Chains are really massive. They go up the hawse pipes. But an empty chain locker kind of looks like this, with slatted lumber on the sides to allow the chain to settle without catching on anything. It's the same thing on Queen Mary as well. Huge chain lockers at the very bow of the ship. Now, go here. Oh, it's kind of a trick to get out of here. Okay. So if you ever go down into the chain locker, you might find that you keep falling in, and the trick is to get to this little ledge here and then walk forward. There we go. So these are the hawse pipes that the chain goes up into. All right, so we are ready to go up another level. All right. And then here's another interesting feature. So it would have looked just like this on Queen Mary as well, except that in this model there's a lever that's missing, but there would have been a lever on the right hand side or something. But basically this is how trash was disposed of on these ships. We are against the well, this is the starboard side of the Titanic, but you can see that the bulkhead, right, the very edge of the hull is right there, and it comes down diagonally, right? That's important because this is a funnel that drops directly down, and on the next level it would have just dropped right out into the sea because of the diagonal shape of the bow. And so basically you would open this lid and then you'd dump all the refuse into that little funnel. Then you would close the lid and you would pull back on a lever that opened a giant, trap door inside the thing, and all the trash would drop out into the ocean. Now, to be fair, back then, in the times of Titanic and Queen Mary, particularly the 1930s and before that, there was no plastic garbage and stuff like that. Mainly, the garbage that there would have been, uneaten food. There would have been cardboard packaging. There would have been paper packaging, maybe like wood crates and things. I doubt that they would toss wood crates down there. It might get stuck in these refuse pipes. But mainly there was just a lot of organic matter. So back then the trash was not as toxic as it is today. Today we have a lot of plastic. But yeah, they didn't have plastic back then. Plastic was still in its infancy. They would have just been developing Bakelite, and Bakelite would have been used not for packaging, but for fittings on ships and other such things. Yeah, so yeah, they would have had much healthier garbage back then. But even then, it still wasn't cool to dump garbage in the ocean. Yeah, and on Queen Mary is the same thing. They dumped garbage. But into the 1960s, there were a lot of regulations about garbage in the ocean. So Queen Mary, they began to collect certain pieces of garbage, and that would go into landfills and stuff like that. But it did make operations on Queen Mary a lot slower, because a lot of the infrastructure on Queen Mary, which was designed for very specific things, such as, the ship was designed to just dump its garbage into the ocean. So now you had to start collecting garbage. Where do you put that nobody will smell it? The ship wasn't designed for it. Today, we have cruise ships that collect garbage all the time. They're not allowed to dump garbage into the ocean. So they have huge rooms with specialized ventilation designed to collect all that garbage and then hold on to it until they get to the next port where they can unload it, and nobody will smell it, because the rooms are specialized not to really smell anywhere else into the ship. But on these older liners like Queen Mary and Titanic, there wasn't any kind of space like that. So their infrastructure certainly was not designed to handle these newer things. We're in a dry storage room for the crew, and it takes up several levels. Yeah, several levels all the way down. We can't drop down into there. They made sure of it. Now if we go back up, we can cross over here. I'm just gonna read some comments real quick. King of Battleship says, it blows my mind that Titanic had 2 more boilers than Queen Mary. Yeah. It's interesting because, there's more boilers, but the volume of steam and the pressure of steam was not the same. So Queen Mary had 2 fewer boilers than Titanic, but those boilers produced a lot more steam and at a much higher pressure than the ones on Titanic. So, yeah, it's interesting. And then you had the Queen Elizabeth, which produced almost as much steam as the Queen Mary, and yet did it with only half the amount of boilers. 12 boilers. So it's interesting, you look at the difference between Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth in terms of boilers and the capacity for creating steam. And Queen Elizabeth was definitely, the Toyota Prius of ocean liners. People sometimes mistake, it's written in books and it says, Queen Elizabeth was a lot more efficient than Queen Mary. But the readers who read that, they mistake those words for thinking that Queen Elizabeth was faster than Queen Mary and thinking that Queen Elizabeth was more powerful than Queen Mary. It's not true. Queen Elizabeth was actually just ever so slightly less faster, ever so slightly less powerful. But the difference was that she was more fuel efficient and she was much better at producing steam than Queen Mary was. So even though she had only 12 Yarrow boilers, those Yarrow boilers were capable of producing almost as much steam as Queen Mary, which is a big feat for its time. If she had one more boiler, she would have definitely had a lot more steam power than Queen Mary and been able to surpass her speed. But it wasn't necessary. Some people might go, why didn't they just add that extra boiler? It wasn't necessary. Queen Mary was the speed queen. Queen Mary was designed to be the one to win the blue ribbon. So they didn't need two ships that could do that. That's just unbelievable expense that they didn't need. You know, if you need to win a race, why, you know, and it's the same race, why, you know, spend money on two race cars when you could just put all your money into one race car? So yeah, that's the thing, is that Queen Elizabeth was designed to be the more fuel efficient, the more economic ship to run, but Queen Mary was the racehorse. Now let's go up to the mast. All the way up there. M. Watts. Wait. M. Watts says, of course, Mary was smaller. Titanic was the largest moving object over time. No, Queen Mary was definitely much, much larger than Titanic. Unless I'm in the middle of the conversation, I'm not quite understanding what you're saying. But if I'm understanding your meaning correctly, no, Queen Mary was much, much larger than Titanic. Queen Mary was 127 feet longer than Titanic. She was and I need to count, 22 feet, or 22 or 24, I can't count correctly, wider than Titanic. She had three more decks than Titanic, because Titanic had 9, Queen Mary had 12. She had 3 more decks than Titanic, you know, and even their tonnage was not the same. Titanic had was it 44,000, just about, maybe, you know, being generous, 45,000 tons, and Queen Mary was 81,000. So the two ships were vastly different in size. Queen Mary was far larger than Titanic. Well, she still is larger. She's still around. Looking out onto the bow. Let's see. Just reading some comments here to make sure I'm keeping caught up. Watts says, was there a hospital medical space where people who were very sick could go? Yes, I could take you there. King of Battleships, I don't have any thoughts on Bremen and Europa. I don't know anything about them. Let's see. Kneffin says, geez, those graphics are incredible. Yeah, they really are. Okay. GTB says plastic was created in 1907. Yes, plastic was created in 1907, but it was a very early form of plastic. It wasn't the kind of plastic we use for packaging. It was a very it was used to create fittings, things like doorknobs, and it was used to create handles and stuff like that. So there would have been no kind of plastic that was used for packaging. So you wouldn't have found plastic in Titanic's garbage, or even the Queen Mary's garbage in the 1930s. You wouldn't have found it. After the war, yes, that's when plastics were starting to be better refined and used for packaging. So you would have started to see more plastics showing up. That's also when they were getting better at, excuse me, at using metals for packaging as well. So, prior to the war, if there was metal in garbage, it was in the form of tin cans. So things like sardine cans and vegetable cans and soup cans, things like that. Of course, which were lead soldered, which made them very dangerous for our health. And tin itself is not safe for our health. But yeah, so, but when it comes to using thin metals for packaging, like the way we use types of aluminum foils for packaging, that started to show up after the Second World War, I should say. And then the plastics that we use for packaging, cellophane and stuff like that, that started to show up on shelves after the Second World War. I wouldn't doubt if there were maybe a few products that had cellophane before the war, but it was not common, that's for sure. All right, so let's get back to the first class areas. Did I walk? Yeah, I did walk in there. That's the pantry. K. Smith says, Queen Mary opened a new tour dedicated to Art Deco at last. Yes, that was one of the suggestions I gave to management at the Queen Mary. Was I said, you guys need to create more stuff that means more to people. So I told them about trying to gear stuff more towards the art and the Art Deco of the ship as well. And so yeah, they came up with redoing a tour. Now they had an Art Deco tour in a couple decades back, but they decided to dust it off and bring it back based on the suggestion I made. So yeah, definitely. King of Battleships. So your question, if Cunard wanted to make Queen Mary fast, why didn't they design her to be hydrodynamic like Normandy? Then she would need less effort and power to achieve through high speed. Well, remember, because I know you've seen my videos, I actually have several videos that talk about these different subjects, especially the one called Queen Mary, A Whole Lot to Know. I know you've seen that one. But remember in those videos that I said that the reason why is because that technology, that hydrodynamic hull technology that you speak of, was very experimental. There was no guarantee that the ship was going to go faster. We look at it in retrospect today and we go, oh yes, Normandy definitely was able to get some kind of speed advantage from the hydrodynamic hull and all of that stuff. But when they were building Normandy, it was very much a risk. They were taking a risk that maybe it would work, and if it worked, it would help them. But there was always the chance that when Normandy was finally constructed, it wouldn't have worked very well. And it was very experimental at the time. Even the bulbous bow, which people always say, oh, well, Normandy had a bulbous bow. And it's like, okay, you can gloat all you want, but Normandy's bulbous bow was very tiny, and it really didn't do much for the ship. It's kind of like when people tell me, oh, well, Queen Elizabeth had a more pointed and sharper prow, which helped her to go through the water much faster. And I'm like, no, because only like 5 feet of that was actually in the water. The rest of it was above the water. I'm like, so it really didn't do anything for the Queen Elizabeth, but when it came to the bulbous bow for Normandy, there's no before and after. There's no way to tell if Normandy really got any significant difference from that tiny little bulbous bow that she had. So, because when you think about it today, ships have massive bulbous bows. They realized that they needed these huge, giant bulbous bows just for getting the effects that they needed. So a tiny little bulbous bow like the one that Normandy had, there's no telling how useful it really was. Particularly because there was no studies done of before and after. There was only one Normandy. The other thing too is that Queen Mary had a feature that did make her faster. It was the cruiser stern. Normandy didn't have a cruiser stern. Normandy had a fantail stern. And the fantail stern was kind of like Titanic's stern. Titanic's stern is a clipper stern, so it's a little bit different, but the idea is still the same. The water comes to a small point at the very stern of the ship. And the propellers are basically almost at the very stern of the ship, essentially, at the waterline at least. Because when you think about it, the very last thing at the waterline of Titanic is the rudder, right? And it comes up above the waterline, and just feet forward of the rudder were the propellers. But on Queen Mary, she had a cruiser stern, which meant that the stern actually sat in the water, creating buoyancy, and it hung over the edge of the ship by quite a distance, over the length of the propellers by quite a distance, I mean to say. So basically, when ships start moving forward, there are hydrodynamic forces that cause the stern of the ship to kind of sink down into the water, right? And that causes more drag along the hull. So the ship actually starts digging into the water by a few feet, and that few feet over the length of hundreds of feet creates a lot of extra drag that the ship has to overcome. But the thing is that with Queen Mary's cruiser stern, that was designed to keep the buoyancy a little higher, to prevent the ship from digging down so deep into the water when that happened, and therefore reduced drag along the hull and helped the ship to move faster. So while some people go, oh, well, Normandy had, the hydrodynamic hull, I say, well, so did Queen Mary. She had the cruiser stern. That's precisely what a cruiser stern was designed for. And so, yeah, Queen Mary did have a hull designed to make her go fast. But so many people have spoken about Normandy's cruiser stern, or I'm sorry, about Normandy's bulbous bow, that people seem to forget that Queen Mary also had a hydrodynamic hull. It just wasn't the same hull as Normandy, and so that's one of those things that's gotten lost with time. And you see so many people repeat it over and over again. Oh, Queen Mary wasn't designed to have a hydrodynamic hull. She was. She had a cruiser stern. So, yeah, that's one of those things that you should take with you, And, yeah. David Shaw says, hello, can we see the grand staircase, please? Sure. We'll go into the ship here. Through the palm court. So we have to load in, and we'll load right into the palm court. We cannot go into the first class kitchens. That's one of the areas on the ship that are not available on this game, Ron. John says, what puzzles me is that they said there was moon. There was, wait, hold on. Sorry. YouTube blocks some of the words, so it's really difficult to see what Okay, so John says, what puzzles me is that they said that there was no moon on the night of April 15th, 1912. That just seems like a weird phenomenon. It's not a weird phenomenon because there's that happens all the time. There's, the moon doesn't it is not perfectly opposite of the sun. So just because the sun goes down doesn't mean the moon rises up. And we know that because we have solar eclipses and lunar eclipses. So basically, you know, a solar eclipse is where it's daytime, the sun is out, and the moon goes in front of the sun and covers it. So if it's daytime on our side when we're having a lunar eclipse and we're seeing the moon on our side of the world, then the opposite side of the world where they're at nighttime, there's no moon, right? So if I'm here in the United States and I'm experiencing a solar eclipse and the moon is coming up to block the sun, then that means in China on the other side of the world, they're having a night without a moon. So that is the moon does not always perfectly align with the opposite of the sun. All right, now we're going to push through into, this is the first class smoking room. This is actually one of the more beautiful spaces on Titanic, honestly, in my opinion. It is just so amazing. I love it. The floor, though, makes me want to have an epileptic seizure or something. It is so wacky. The red and the blue. But looking past that, the walls with the dark paneling and the gilded carvings and stuff, it's just amazing. It's just absolutely beautiful. Now if we Catherine, I can't pronounce, sorry, I don't know how to say it. Catherine says, how accurate is all of this? Pretty darn accurate. There were some things which, because everything is based off of photographs of Olympic and some photographs of Titanic. And then, of course, they have blueprints of Titanic, schematics. They have everything from, like, carpenters' designs and stuff like that. So they were able to reference a lot of the original plans for how Titanic was built to do this. Because a lot of that stuff still survives. But there are one or two things here and there that the designer said that they changed. This is the aft grand staircase. It's not quite as grand as the forward grand staircase. So I'll take you guys to the forward grand staircase. But yeah, there were things that the builders of the game said that they left out, because until they're ready to fully release the game, they didn't want copycats to copy it. It was stuff that otherwise would remain secret until then. So there are a few things here and there, which I don't even know which ones, don't even ask because I don't know. But there are a few things here and there which are purposefully not accurate for the sake of preventing copycats from knowing it's even there. So here's the reading and writing room. Pretty cool. It's, pretty straightforward. You come in here to read or write a letter or postcard, that kind of thing. I have a postcard from RMS Mauritania, and it dates back to 1911. And it was written by a Polish family, and they wrote the letter literally in like half Polish, half English. So it's actually really difficult to translate it because unless I can speak to someone who speaks like Polish or something, then I don't know what it says, because yeah, it's kind of weird. It's hard to describe. I've tried. I can't translate it. But yeah, this is the forward grand staircase. This is the one that everybody thinks of when they think of Titanic. And, it's funny. A a lot of people don't actually know that there were two grand staircases on Titanic. It's just Catherine. Okay, that's a lot better because I was like, what is that? Um, okay, let's see here. Yeah, the guys have certainly done a fantastic job with this game. Um, what I thought was interesting about James Cameron's Titanic movie that I kind of learned through the special features was that they widened the grand staircase by a few feet. They said a total of 3 feet from side to side. So I'm guessing 1.5 feet on this side and then 1.5 feet on the other side, because there was really only room for like one person to stand here between these posts. And they needed these grand scenes where two people would walk down the staircase at the same time. And there really wasn't space for two people to walk down. It just looked too narrow. So they widened the staircase by a total of 3 feet to create more space and make the area look more grand. But yeah. Uh, Now, what's great is even though the game is very quiet, occasionally you do hear things. You hear the ticking of the clock. Like if we go up to it, you might be able to hear it. Yeah. So there's a few things here and there, but it's otherwise very, very quiet. But the finalized game will have music and stuff like that. Oh, geez. I keep this painting always freaks me out because when I stand like over here or on the other side, if I stand a certain way, in my peripheral vision, it looks like there's a person peeking around that post way over there. And I always, I forget that the painting is there. And I end up getting really freaked out because I'm like, there should be no people in this game. So I just had one of those moments where I actually got freaked out because I was like, I was like, there's a person standing there. Um, but yeah, so I don't know what it is. I think it's because this tree sometimes looks like the head of a person, and it just all combines to create like a neck and like a profile just peeking around the corner. I don't know what it is, but it always, every single time I stand at the top of the staircase, I forget the painting is there, and I think there's a person standing there. It just freaks me out. All right, we are in the first class gymnasium, and yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff. Every time I come into this gymnasium, I always say the same thing, but it's true. If we still had like a lot of the stuff that was quite like this, I'd probably go to gyms more often because there's a lot of practical stuff here, you know? Like these aren't just like the same kind of bicycles that, you pedal on at at a gym. These are like racing bicycles, so you can race each other. Like if I had a friend with me, I'd be like racing them all the time on those things. We do have something like this today. This is there's a specific name for it, but I can't remember the name at the top of my head. But it's basically for rowing machines. Sorry, I don't know why that didn't come to me. Rowing machines. So you sit on this thing here and you pretend like you're in a rowboat and you just row, and it builds the muscles that you use for rowing. We do have something like that today, but it doesn't look the same, and they aren't in every gym. So you can't find a rowing machine in every gym. Like sometimes you're just lucky if there's a very, very massive gym with all kinds of varieties of stuff, you might find a rowing machine. Um, I don't even know what this thing is. It looks like it's double-sided. Oh, you know what it is? It's one of those things. You take these handles. And there's two people could sit at this machine, but in this case there's one side setup. They take these handles, they pull those handles, it pulls weights up, and meanwhile your butt slides on that little box there. So yeah, and then we have the electric camels. So or electric horses. Honestly, there is a difference. They used to have electric horses and they had electric camels. And sometimes it's hard for me to tell the difference because sometimes they look exactly the same. I'm not even kidding. But basically the idea is you sit on these things and they mimic the movement of a horse or a camel, and it builds the muscles that you use for horseback or camel riding. Not that many people ride camels very often, but but it builds those muscles nevertheless. But the thing is that a lot of some of the equipment in these gyms build muscles that people don't today really care for. Like, nobody needs their hip muscles today. They want their biceps done. They want their quads done, So, so a lot of these machines aren't really useful to people today because people want to build certain muscles that you can see. So, and some of these machines, I just plain don't know what they are. I look at them and I'm like, this looks like some kind of medieval torture device, Like, I'm sure there's a I think this is a massager. I don't remember for certain, but you stand in between these and it can massage your back and your chest and stuff like that. It was often believed that if you had certain muscles massaged, those muscles would start building. I think in some instances people still believe that. It might be true. I think there is something to be said about massaging a muscle, and that helps it loosen up. And when it's loosened up, you use the muscle more often, and then that muscle builds. So it's probably true. But yeah, so there was a lot of massaging devices in gyms back then because it was believed that if you massage a muscle, it will start growing. So, yeah. Oh, we got LMG Vids in the chat. What is he saying? Do you think Titanic's linoleum floor would have been as squeaky as Queen Mary's new linoleum floor? I've noticed Queen Mary's flooring has been extremely squeaky after they changed it out. Really? I don't... Well, yeah, that actually makes sense because it's got... So, yeah, I think yes. To answer your question, yes, Titanic's would have been just as squeaky. And the reason why is because if you remember the main hall on the Queen Mary, and the floors were very shiny before they changed them. They were very shiny. That's because they were made of linoleum, but they covered them in some kind of wax, some kind of polish that helped make them look shiny and fresh. But the thing is, that wax, that polish, is very much a, modern day kind of touch to a linoleum surface. We do that today to help protect the linoleum surface, make it easier to mop. But then over time, that wax, that varnish, yellows and decays, and it gets dirty over time. Even though you clean it all the time, it just builds up dirt. And so that's why they ended up having to change out. Well, I mean, that was part of the reason why they ended up having to change out the 1994 linoleum on the Queen Mary, was because it was too dirty looking and it was also warped. But the linoleum on the Queen Mary today doesn't have that waxy polished layer, which makes it actually easier. It makes it non-slip. So that's why it makes that squeaky sound when you walk on it, is because it's very grippy. It's non-slip. And that's how it would have been on the Queen Mary back then. But the difference is that people back then knew how to walk. they didn't drag their feet when they walked. So they had a good walking etiquette. They would pick up their feet as they walked, and there would be no squeaking sound. But you, my friend, well, you sometimes you walk a certain way because you have to hold the camera a certain way. So I can understand that. But there are times, my friend, where your walking etiquette isn't what it should be. And frankly, we, the elite of society, look down upon you. Just kidding. Oh my god. Oh, Chris is the best. But yeah, so we're just wandering the forward areas of this deck. These are the lift motors. So these are the for the first class lifts, and there were 3 lifts side by side. And for my American friends who are like, what is a lift? It's an elevator. We call them elevators in the United States, but they were called lifts. All right. Oh, we got Steve in the chat. Hello, Steve. Let's see. We'll go to the officers area. Okay. King of Battleship says, where was the 3rd class gym on Queen Mary? 3rd class did not have a gym on Queen Mary. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the Marconi room. I love the way the sunlight streams in from the dome above. Yeah, we can kind of see the whole room from here, how they operated it. But further in, let's see. I forget if I can, I don't think I can close this door, but I can sneak around it. This is the back room. So they had all kinds of machinery here. You know, they had a generator for generating the specific, oh man, I have to become Alex the scientist for a second here because I'm not very good at this kind of stuff. But basically, this generator created a pulse that, you know, it's what the Marconi machine ran off of. So yeah, don't ask me to explain it further because I honestly can't, and I don't think I care that much. But yeah, it creates the specific pulse needed to run the Marconi machine. And then you have the batteries. So you need to be able, well, first of all, these batteries were designed to help create the powerful charge needed to send off the signal. Because basically, in order to send a signal a far distance, you need to have a lot of power. I mean, like a lot of power. And it needs to discharge very quickly, which means you need to have a large load of batteries in place to do that. So that's what all these batteries are for, is to allow them to send off really powerful pulses all at once. That helped to relieve the strain, the load from the ship's main power. Because if you have constant discharging of really rapid pulses of power, that can actually kind of degrade your electrical system on the ship. So the Marconi room had its own stuff, its own equipment to be able to do that. It was all operated by the Marconi wireless company. I think that's the name. Marconi. Pretty sure it's called Marconi Wireless, but I can't remember. But yes, it is Marconi. That's something I know for certain. It's Marconi. And this is where the operators slept. So they actually slept nearby. their job was very, very important, because not only did they do simple things like sending off messages and stuff from passengers to their families, but they also received orders and things like that from, from the maritime people and other ships as well. They were the ones that received the warnings, the ice warnings from other ships and things like that. The night that Titanic was going to sink and all that kind of stuff. We are here in the wheelhouse of the bridge of Titanic, and this wheelhouse was the main area that they used out at sea, but when they were in port, they would use that one forward up ahead. And this was one of the telemotor helms that they had. Queen Mary has telemotor helms as well. They're smaller though. But they're essentially the same thing. I mean, honestly, like when you look at this thing, it looks almost just like, because I mean, this is just the helm itself, but the telemotor part of the helm is that thing back there that pierces right through the compass. But yeah, that machine there looks just like the ones on Queen Mary. The only difference is that on Queen Mary, the helm is directly attached right in front of it. So yeah, pretty interesting. Here's another telemotor helm. This one looks slightly different. Yeah. Some pretty cool stuff here. I think last time I was on this game, I was talking about these wooden boards here with a hole in the center. I don't know for certain, but I'm guessing that those were designed so, I don't know, maybe if it was really sunny and the sun was coming right into the windows and it was, blocking everybody's view. I don't know, maybe they would move those up to block some of the sunlight out. Or maybe it was for a storm. That might have been it, for a storm, to prevent, if the windows were to smash and break, you'd have these boards go up. I have no idea. That's interesting, though. I see. Okay, so Steve says they're storm covers in case the glass breaks. King of Battleships says, so how did third class get exercise on Queen Mary if they didn't have a gym and they just walked? Did they just walk nonstop? Technically, yes. So on Queen Mary, the deck that is at the base of the forward mast that is surrounded by, cargo winches and stuff like that, that was the third class promenade, and that's where they could kind of walk around. It didn't provide much walking space, but it was a little bit of something. But you also have to remember that people weren't as obsessed about exercise as they are today. Today, people are like, oh, I'm just going to pop by the gym and get my exercise in. It wasn't that big a deal back then. People had bigger things to worry about. They had life to worry about, and it was, especially in the 1930s, they were getting out of the Great Depression and all that stuff. People just had bigger things to worry about than exercising. But if you were in second or third class, you were likely a more wealthy citizen, and you had the time to worry about things like getting in the right shape. So so it makes sense, because, if you have that kind of time on your hands and you had time for recreation, then you might go and, lift some weights or something in the gym. But yeah, third class didn't really worry about that till after the war. That's when people actually were traveling on the Queen Mary for leisure. In the 1930s, a lot of the passengers were traveling to, they were immigrants. They were migrating, is that right? Emigrating. They're not birds. They were emigrating to a new country, and some of them were refugees from the increasing tensions in Europe. So third class really didn't worry about exercise. They had much bigger things to worry about. They worried about, you know, fleeing Hitler's regime. You know, they worried about you know, how they were going to feed their families, that kind of thing. Exercise didn't really come into their minds of the third class until after World War II, when a lot of the passengers became leisure third class passengers. And Cunard even started calling them tourist class. You know, they switched the names around from third class to tourist class because it made people feel less like steerage passengers and more like travelers. Because that's actually what they were. They were travelers by the end of the war. So let's see here. K. Smith says, by the way, on Queen Mary, in the isolation ward, one of the porthole glasses is cracked across in 2 places. I wonder what in the world could break such a thick glass. That is a very good question, because that glass, if I have my information correctly, was designed to withstand 2,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. 2,000 pounds. That is a strong piece of glass. So what in the world would crack it? I mean, Steve could probably answer that question for us, because he knows a lot more about what happened to the ship in the Long Beach years. But yeah, if I had to put my guess on it, there was a time when, in the Disney years, when Disney cleared the equipment on the A deck, poop deck area in order to install a massive swimming pool. They wanted to build like a hotel swimming pool at the very stern of the ship. And someone on Facebook several weeks ago told the story from first person point of view, saying that they had actually gone through and built the pool, according to this person. I don't know if it's true. I kind of wonder, but according to them, they built the pool, and the pool actually, something with the drain failed, and it completely emptied out into the ship. This is why I kind of question the story, because I'm like, where did all that water go? How come it's never been mentioned that there was any kind of water damage from that pool? And then the other thing too is that they tried the pool once, it failed, and then they got rid of it. That doesn't make sense. Disney doesn't do that. When they invest money in something, if it breaks, they fix it because they invested all that money in it. So I am curious about it. I'm like, I don't think they actually built the pool. They would have had to cut out all of the bulkheads underneath to build the pool, and the bulkheads are still there. So I'm like, I don't know. So, I mean, it could have been the weight of the pool if they did build it, but I don't think they built it. Yeah, Steve says that's not true. They never actually, it never got past the design phase. Yeah, see? I didn't think so. Yeah. All right. Ozzy says, will they fix the porthole on the Queen Mary? It's a difficult question to answer. Because you have to understand that there's a lot of stuff to fix on the Queen Mary. We don't know how much is going to get fixed. We don't know when it's going to get fixed. You know, there's much bigger things to worry about than a cracked porthole. You know, like they've got the side shell plating on the promenade deck that is completely breaking off of the ship, and the side shell is pretty much what is supporting the sun deck above right now. So that's kind of a major issue. So you're talking about something so tiny, in a world of huge big problems that the ship faces. So it's really, I can't answer that. Like, do they want to fix it? Yeah, they want to fix it. Will they ever get to it? I don't know. It's so hard to tell. So And of course, everybody wants to know, like, if something like that gets fixed, when will it get fixed? And that's just the thing. Like, I couldn't tell you. There are so many huge priority projects that need to get done that, oh, jeez, I thought there was a person there again. See what I'm talking about? It's just like, oh my God, that painting. But yeah, there's just so many huge projects, you know? Yeah, like Steve says, priorities, you know? Steve says that piece of glass would be $300. Yeah. You know, there were broken side lights. They call them side lights on the promenade deck because they're so big. But basically, they were like these ones here, almost exactly like these, even almost the same dimensions too. The side lights on Queen Mary's promenade deck are like this, and there were a lot of broken ones before the pandemic. But after the ship reemerged from the pandemic, they were all replaced. But that's because like hundreds of hundreds of visitors walk by those windows every day. So they were like top priority among windows to fix because people see them all the time. But not that many people go into the isolation ward, and not many people going into the isolation ward expect perfection. So, you know, there's a reason. Oh, here's one of the rooms on the ship on Titanic that I really love because it's got quilted maple walls. So when I was talking earlier about how quilted maple kind of looks like satin, this is what I was talking about. Except what they have in this game, it doesn't quite capture it. I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all because it's hard to capture from a photograph how these quilted maple walls work. But if you stand from a distance in the game, you can kind of see. It looks from a distance three-dimensional, but in real life, if you were to walk up to the quilted maple walls, they would look three-dimensional, like wrinkled sheets of satin. It just looks so beautiful. And you could like crouch and stand up and crouch and stand up to kind of see how the light bends around the grain. And it's so beautiful. It is just like a holographic effect. It's so beautiful. But you know, it's hard to capture it. Especially in a video game. So I don't blame them. It doesn't, when you get up close to it, it looks kind of weird, but from a distance, it looks beautiful. It looks just like quilted maple would look. So yeah, good on them for getting that as accurate as they could. That is amazing. I'm surprised that they even got it that realistic looking. Well, I'm not surprised. I'm not saying that they're not skilled. They're very skilled. I'm just amazed that someone would attempt it and then also get so close to the real thing. That's amazing. Yeah. Diogo says, I believe this cabin is satinwood. Satinwood. Okay, well it does look like satin, that's for sure. Yeah, Steve's right. The grain should not be visible in the light. Yes, but the thing is, again, you know, it's hard. You know, imagine trying to write that into a computer code, you know, and then make that work. It's hard, you know. So I don't blame them for it not being 100% correct because it's hard. It's got to be difficult. Let me look up this satinwood. Because there is a satinwood. Queen Mary has satinwood. Green. Images. Oh. Okay, yeah, I think you're right. That is satinwood. That's not quilted maple. It looks a lot like quilted maple though. I'm looking at it on Google right now. And on Google, it looks a lot like quilted maple, but you can definitely tell a difference. Okay. Yeah, there's definitely a difference. So I was wrong. That wasn't quilted maple. That was satinwood. but it does from a distance look a lot like quilted maple. Especially the ones on Queen Mary. Some of the ones on Queen Mary just like, wow. But that's what I'm saying. Like if you look up quilted maple on Google, the ripples in the wood, the wood grain look very tight on Google, but on Queen Mary they're very large ripples. And the reason why is because, like I said, in the 1930s, a lot of the best examples of wood grain were still around for you to chop down. But today, all of the best wood in the world has pretty much been already chopped down. And what you're seeing that they're able to harvest today is just the second best example, you know? So you're not even seeing the best of it. The Queen Mary has the best of it. And so it would be hard to find something that matches it quite so well. This is a beautiful table. My God. I saw it from a distance and I had to walk up to it. I was like, wow. Ozzy says, when will they repaint on the Queen Mary funnel? They are already doing it. It should be finished with repainting soon. The weather has not been very good. It's been raining. You can't paint during rain because the paint will just run off. So, but they were painting it in the dry days prior to the rain, and then they're going to finish doing it as long as it's dry and sunny outside. So, but it will take time. It's all based on the weather. All based on the weather. GTB says, I love the ship. I cannot believe they would scrap a ship like this. Yeah, it's one of those things, like I was telling people that, you know, when Olympic was scrapped, you know, I mean, today people are shocked. They're like, why would you scrap a ship like that? But it's because, you know, back then, ocean liners were everywhere. There was no nostalgia for them because they were always there. You know, it was like there was always someone saying, oh, there's a newer, bigger, better one coming. It's kind of like the same reason. Oh, here's another one. It's kind of like the same reason why, you know, people aren't really nostalgic for like certain cars, you know, like no one's going like, oh, look at this, like, you know, 20, no, maybe more like phones, really. Because I can't think, well, I'm not very good at cars anyway, but it's kind of like people being nostalgic for phones. Like, oh, the iPhone 12, why would they stop producing that? It's so great. And it's like, well, because everybody wants the iPhone 14, you know? So it's, you know, it's like that. It's like they're everywhere. Nobody cares, you know? And so that's how it was back then. You know, people were like, okay, well, the Olympic is the kind of ship that my parents used to love, but I love the Art Deco ships of the modern age. You know, so that's how it was back then in the 1930s. People were like, well, we want to see the newest Art Deco ships. And to be honest, you know, like ships like the Queen Mary, for instance, were made of a lot more expensive materials than ships like the Olympic class were. You know, sure, the Olympic class had these beautiful wood carvings, and then they had the, well, I think that's wood too, but some, you know, sometimes on real buildings they're plaster. But yeah, they had these beautiful wood carvings and stuff like that. But that kind of stuff was not prized in the 1930s. What they liked was marquetry. They liked you know, wood grain and stuff like that. That's the kind of things that showed up on Queen Mary. Lots of metal. So there was, you know, lots of emphasis on shiny metals and things like that. So, you know, the different ages like to see the different decorations of their time. And so ships like Olympic were seen as like grandmother's ship, you know, like nobody really cared. They wanted the newest and greatest and best ship, and that's the one that they wanted to see. And so the idea of saving one as a hotel, because I know at one point there were people who wanted to save the Olympic and keep it as a hotel, but that movement didn't go very far because, you know, they didn't have enough support for it. Nobody really cared. They're like, dude, we're building ocean liners all the time. Who cares? You know? And so it was hard to get people to support that kind of thing back then. And Queen Mary was the first, not the only, but the first ocean liner to ever be converted into a museum and hotel, you know? And even then, people didn't really know what to do with it. They were like, what do we do? I mean, ocean liners are no longer seen as these magnificent vessels. They're seen as like, you know, the way mom and pop used to get across the ocean. Now we have these beautiful jetliners of the space age, you know, and I can't even emphasize enough the space age, the idea that air travel and space travel were something that, you know, that people wanted, although we never had space travel back then per se, but you know, but there was the promise of space travel. I mean, look at the Jetsons, the cartoon. It was definitely, you know, but yeah, anyway, the point is that air travel and the space age were huge, had huge effects on the ocean liner industry, and therefore things like the Queen Mary, you know, ships like the Queen Mary, people just didn't care. So they weren't really sure what to do with the Queen Mary. They made a lot of mistakes back then, and, you know, hopefully they learned from them. I don't want to say they did because we don't know for sure yet. We'll see. But it seems like they've been learning from their mistakes because they've been making a lot of corrections. This is one of those areas that you're kind of like, wow, I'm in first class. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the combination of just seeing the chairs and everything set up, and then the little grand staircase here with the gold and all that. It's tiny, it's cute, but it looks so fancy. You're just kind of sitting here going, wow, I'm in first class. I wonder if my live chat had quit. Hold on. Oh, yep, it did. Okay, so here we go. I had to refresh the chat because I was like, well, nobody's been talking the last 10 minutes. Diogo says, yes, it's quite difficult to differentiate every wood type. Queen Mary definitely wins in the wood department. Yeah. But once again, folks, if you want to learn about all 56 different types of wood on the Queen Mary, you want to see the list of it and see how the wood grains are put together, you can visit my website. The link is in the description below. It's called RMSQM Wiki, and it's all about the Queen Mary, her design, construction, her history, her engineering, all that kind of stuff, all that juicy stuff. Plumbit says, does the Queen Mary rise with the tide? Yes, she does. She certainly rises with the tide. And then, in fact, there was video footage the other day. There was a huge rainstorm that hit the California coast. A lot of heavy winds. And there was a video someone posted on Facebook that actually showed the Queen Mary rolling slightly with the weather. She was rolling in the water very slightly, but you could still see it. So it reminded me when I saw that, I was like, can you imagine? It's like if you were on the ship right then, it would kind of feel like being out at sea, except very mild. But we are in the Maids and Valets Saloon. This is the passengers brought their own maids and valets with them sometimes, particularly first class passengers, and they couldn't dine with the passengers, so they had their own dining room. This was it. And it was like this on Queen Mary as well. Queen Mary had a space on our deck that is often simply labeled annex, but on the interiors was a decorated space that was a dining room for the maids and valets, as well as a dining room for passengers' children who couldn't attend the main restaurant for any reason. So yeah, pretty cool. Here's a little pantry for serving the maids and valets. They were cared for just like passengers. On Queen Mary, the servants that traveled with the passengers were treated a lot like third class passengers, which it's not an insult. It's not, that's a big deal, because it's, they weren't treated like, oh, you're just a servant, here's your toast, like it was like, oh, you're a third class passenger, like, can I get you a cup of tea, like, can I get you a blanket or something, whatever. It was just like, it was a nice service. I think I get nervous when I compare things to third class, because there's a lot of people who still think that, the name third class is synonymous with, with poor quality and, and unfair conditions. And that's not really true. On these old ships like Titanic and Queen Mary, third class was actually pretty good for the time, and it improved on many ships over the years. With each coming ship, better third class accommodations showed up, so yeah. Here is the first class barbershop. Just reading comments here. Maybe I could just bring this over here real quick while I read these. It's kind of cool to stand here and just look up at the dome. Hello, K4RNA. Diogo says, interesting on how White Star Line ships, servants would be placed in other first-class cabins. Aquitania had an entire section on boat deck with cabins specifically for servants. I wonder if Cunard kept that on Queen Mary. They did not. No. On Queen Mary, they had inside cabins that were directly connected to a lot of the staterooms and the suites on main and A decks. So you would see these little tiny rooms on the deck plans that were just designed for one person. There was no toilet or anything connected to them, but that tiny room was connected to the main stateroom via a very short private hallway. Because it wasn't out in the corridor, it was a private hallway that was within the boundary of the stateroom. And so you would see that a lot. And then even then, if for those passengers who were traveling with a servant but were not, they had just a regular cabin, they didn't have a stateroom or a suite, they had these small inside cabins designed for just one person, no attached toilet or bathroom, and those would often be used for the servant. And they would have to like cross the corridor to get to their boss's room to help them with whatever they needed to help with. But the advantage of renting a suite on the Queen Mary was that your servant slept in their own quarters within the boundary of your suite, so that if you needed something from them, they could just easily enter your room and stuff like that without having to go out into the corridor. So that was kind of the idea. I know Ozzy's like, it's time for Alex's nap. I know. I got 6 hours of sleep last night, but it certainly wasn't enough. Not for me. All right. So I showed that. And I think we're on C deck. We've seen all this stuff. Pretty sure. Well, let me show you one of these cabins here. This is a good example of a typical first class cabin on Titanic. Again, not all first class cabins were the suites and staterooms you think of. So sometimes people, they go like, oh, Titanic had the best rooms, and it's like, yeah, if you had the money for the big suites and stuff like that, then yeah, you had some of the best rooms on the ship. But not all first class passengers stayed in rooms like that. I think we're coming up upon the this is the what do they call this? The Strauss suite. So this is probably arguably the most beautiful stateroom cabins in the whole ship. And yeah, I mean, you can see why. But not everybody could afford this. Especially even if you were in first class, not everybody could afford it. Your typical room did not look like this. But it is quite lovely. I do like this room a lot. I'm always astounded that when you sneak up to the table here, the patterns on the table, the cloth appear to be raised patterns. But the trick is that it's not. It's a trickery of the designers of the game. They were able to make it look three-dimensional by creating shadow and stuff like that on some of the raised sections, but it's not actually raised. It's perfectly flat. So that's kind of a cool thing that the designers did. Saved them a lot of saved them a lot of work when it came to designing the pattern. This is the main sleeping quarters of the Strauss suite. And there were these toilets and a toilet and a bathroom that were shared between this room and that room. Pretty sure. And yeah, so there's the toilet, and then there's the bathroom. It says White Star Line on the mat there. Yeah. And I do see a lot of stuff here. Like, okay, I know this big plunger at the bottom here is the drain of the tub. So you would push that down and it would drain the tub. But these valves here, these might be the taps, I'm pretty sure. But the smaller taps, I don't know what those were. The big ones obviously has got to be hot and cold, but the small ones I don't know. The small ones could be fresh water. If it was anything like the Queen Mary, they didn't want you wasting too much fresh water. It was difficult for the ship to produce enough fresh water for everybody. So, not that it was impossible, it's just that it was more difficult, because they had to filter it all. So they told everybody, if you're going to take a shower or a bath, bathe in salt water and rinse with fresh water. So it's possible that this whole valve system here, the big wheels, the valves, those could be salt water, and the tops of the small ones could be fresh water. I have no idea, but I'm guessing that that might be it. All right. Here's another little area I like. This is the first class purser's desk. Um, just reading comments here. Ozzy, a head is a head is a toilet on a military vessel, but on a passenger vessel they did not refer to it as a head. That was kind of like a slang term. It would be considered a first class passenger, so it was referred to as a toilet. It was just a nicer term to use on a passenger ship. But on a military vessel, it was perfectly normal to refer to toilets as heads, but not on passenger ships. Steve says the soap you washed with was different from normal soap because regular soap would not lather in salt water. Interesting. I would go up there, but I don't. There's nothing to really see up there, so I don't like going over there. Let's go down another level to the main restaurant. So this is like a foyer, like a place where passengers would wait to be seated in the restaurant. And this is the restaurant beyond these windows here. Oh, geez. Almost immediately I have issues with frame rate going in there. Okay, so yeah, I try not to go into that restaurant because I get frame rate issues in there. It's the only place on the ship that that happens. Sometimes if I go in on this side, I don't have that problem. Let me see. Nope, there we go. Frame rate drop instantly. Okay, yeah, I can't go into the restaurant because it would, you guys would probably think that like the game completely stopped or something. Um, but yeah, so that was the restaurant. It sucks. I'd like to bring you guys in there, but for some reason, there's just something up with that room. And then this way, I think, leads to, yeah, the mail and baggage holds. Oh, sorry. I ran into the wall there. I was reading a comment and I just kept like walking right into the wall. I was like, why am I not going down the stairs? K4RNA says, Alex, your last Queen Mary video was very well done. If you guys have not seen it, check it out. Thank you so much. Yeah, that video was about 6 months of work because I had Chris, and Chris is probably still watching the show. But I had Chris going back to the ship several times over the course of 6 months to film every square inch of the ship. And sometimes he had to film it multiple times because, you know, he'd go there 1 month and then the next month things would be different. And I'm like, oh, well, now I have to show how it looks now and not how it looked then. So I sent him back there several times to film, and he would film for hours and hours, and I'd be on the phone with him, telling him where to film, where to go, what to do, how to point the camera, that kind of thing. And then over the course of that 6 months, I was going through and double checking my work, making sure I had the information correct. So it was literally 6 months in the making to make that video. And even then, by the end of this year, it will be an outdated video because a lot of stuff will change. Man, I keep yawning. Here is a baggage lift, or mail lift, I should say, because they would put the mail sacks in there and lift it to this level, or down into the lower level. And the lower level has all of the mail sacks. And so it would all get sorted during the voyage. So that's why they have these kind of open like this, is because they would sort it all. So it would all come in, and it would be, you know, every letter, everything was addressed to somebody else, somebody, you know, different part of the United States, different part of the UK, and it would get sorted. Much like a mail car on a train too, because on a train they would sort it on the train as it went to its destined city. So here's one of the baggage holds on the ship. Oh, he says Chris is eating a cookie. K4 Arne says, I learned stuff I did not know. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, that's carrying the Royal Mail is part of the reason why ships like Titanic and Queen Mary were referred to as RMS, which stood back then for Royal Mail Steamer or Royal Mail Steamship. Today it is just referred to as Royal Mail Ship because not every RMS ship was a steamship. But yeah. And the last RMS ship to still be sailing the ocean to this day is the Queen Mary 2. Although technically it does not carry the Royal Mail, but it was awarded the title of RMS by the Royal Mail. So by honor, it holds the RMS title, which still counts, by the way. Some people are like, that doesn't count. But in my mind, it does. It still counts. The Royal Mail says it counts, so it counts. Then this is the way to the squash court. Now, the squash court on Titanic was way down in the lower levels, which to me is odd, because when you design a ship, you put the heaviest rooms in the lower levels of the ship, right? Like the heaviest things. There's a reason why the swimming pools on old ocean liners were down at the bottom levels of the ship, is because the heaviest rooms were put at the bottom and the lightest rooms were put at the top to help balance out the weight of the ship. And so on Queen Mary, the squash court, which as you can see on this in Titanic is also 2 levels. They had very similar sized squash courts. 2 levels. But as you can see, there's nothing in here. This room is not heavy. It's not weighted down or anything. There's no equipment in here. It's empty. But on Queen Mary, the squash court, which is roughly the same size, was put on two levels, sun and sports decks. But here on Titanic, it's put way down here. I don't even know what levels these are. These got to be lower than E deck. And so it's so very odd to me. It's like, why? Why did they build it way down here? You don't normally see that on ships. Like I said, you put the heaviest rooms with all the most equipment and weight at the bottom of the ship. So yeah, I don't even know what deck we're on. That's D deck above. So D, E, F, and then the bottom of the squash court is G deck. Yeah, that's weird, isn't it? I think that's weird. I don't think this area has anything for us to see. Just a maze of locked doors. A lot like Queen Mary, huh? A maze of locked doors. It's like one of my my pet peeves about the Queen Mary is that you could walk down these areas that used to be public areas back when the ship was in service, and yet all the hallways are still open for you to like wander, but they're completely like every door is locked. There's no reason to be there. Kind of like being at the aft end of A deck. It's just like there's the only thing that you can access back there is bathrooms. You know, it's like I don't like the idea of a ship being completely locked up. It's like why are you there then? Why did you spend all this money to get on the ship if you're only allowed to eat at the restaurants and take tours? It's like, and then those tours are like $50. It's like $50 to see these rooms, and the rooms are empty, by the way. You know, like, you know, if you want to see the first class main lounge on Queen Mary, you got to spend at least $30 on a tour, and that tour might maybe take you to that room. And you go to that room, and it was once a very beautiful room furnished with all this amazing furniture, and it's completely empty. It looks lifeless and dead. That's how it's often described by people. Lifeless and dead. And yet you paid all this money to see it, and it doesn't even look that amazing because it's missing all of its furniture. And I get it. You know, the rooms are rented out for banquets and for meetings and stuff like that. But you know, Promenade Deck is the main area of the Queen Mary. That's where everybody enters the ship. It's where all the main stuff is. You shouldn't have a very massive space like the main lounge on Promenade Deck completely closed off to people. It's just, that's where everybody goes. It's like going to Disneyland and they're like, oh, sorry, Main Street's closed. You got to go around it. It's like weird. It's like, what? Why? Like, it's the main area of the ship. You know, it's just weird. So, and especially if you're going to spend all this money to take tours of the ship, the room should be furnished, you know, so you got something to look at, you know, so it doesn't look lifeless and dead. So it looks nice. So it looks like it's being cared for. You know, furniture helps make these ships look like ships, you know, and so it's like, you know, if you go into the Mauritania room or something, there should be furniture in there. Mauritania room is the old third-class garden lounge, for those that are wondering. And that's on Queen Mary again. I'm talking about Queen Mary. But yeah, the furniture makes a ship a ship. And when you remove it all and you don't show anything, the room just looks sad and empty. All right, so hey, so Diogo says the squash court was a late addition to Olympic. Interesting. Wait, someone says the Royal Mail is privatized. Is that true? Is it no longer government ran? Is someone able to confirm that with me? Because that is surprising. That's like hearing if the USPS becomes privatized. It's like, what? Yeah, Diogo, I understood what you meant by late. But yeah, the Royal Mail privatized. That's crazy. It's craziness. Let's go back to the main lounge for first class. It's probably one of the largest and most beautiful rooms on Titanic. I especially like the chandelier in the center. It is absolutely amazing. And Steve says the Royal Mail is privatized. That is so sad. What? I'm just in shock. I'm just like, what? Privatized in 2012. This is one of those nooks and crannies on the Titanic that I wish I could sit. Just sit there and look up. That being said, I have never supported the idea of building an actual Titanic unless it was going to be used as a museum. But I never liked the idea of like, oh, let's build a cruise ship in the shape and likeness of Titanic and then have people sail aboard it for these nostalgic voyages. Maybe I'm a bit too sensitive. I don't know, but I feel like that just is wrong. Like it's just this. To me, it feels the same as like, if someone were to be like, oh, let's rebuild the New York Twin Towers and, you know, and use that as like some kind of fun party place to hang out. It just doesn't seem right. So yeah, that's why I've never supported the idea of what's his name? That man that was gonna build a second Titanic. I always forget his name. Um, yeah, I just never supported it. I just didn't feel right to me. Um, all right. So I think I've pretty much showed you all the major areas of the ship. I don't think there's much else to show you. Oh, here's Mr. Andrews' room. You can see he's still got the blueprints of the Titanic on his bed, or both beds. Well, the thing about privatization like that, like the Royal Mail, is I know it can be said, oh, better that's privatized than to not exist at all. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the situation of the Royal Mail, but a lot of times, if you privatize something that was once, a government funded thing, it doesn't exist anymore. Then, so it's kind of like, well, it doesn't exist. You know, um, it's like the USPS. It's like I don't support the USPS being privatized because it's a government service. It oh, I don't want to get too deep into it, but it provides things that we need. But if it were to be privatized, those things could then be, you know, the prices could balloon out of control like crazy. You know, they might get rid of certain features that are necessary. Might be difficult for people who need to ship their medications, you know, to their houses. Might cost a lot more than it used to. That kind of thing, you know. Companies, they tend to like to make things premium. You know, you got Amazon, who does their own shipping services, which their services are great. They're very reliable, but at the same time, they make it so, oh well, you know, you can you know subscribe to making the shipping services. What am I trying to say? Like, you get Amazon Prime, and and you get free shipping on stuff because you're paying for it, as part of a subscription. Um, that kind of thing. It just it muddies things up. And while it's great that I can have the option to do that for Amazon, it'd be great to not have the option. I don't know what I'm trying to say, because I'm trying to like wander around this ship at the same time as talking. But yeah, so it makes me sad. I mean, I guess it's not, the Royal Mail isn't technically gone, but it's privatized now, which is essentially on paper the same thing as being gone. But yeah, Golden V says Royal Mail are terrible for package delivery. Always have trouble with them. Yeah, I can see that being a problem. You guys want to know something funny? So, my friend Eric, he's such a close friend of mine, but I know he doesn't watch my channel. He says he does, but I know he doesn't watch my channel. And the way I know that is because he texts me right in the middle of my live streams, like he is right now, and he's just like trying to have conversation. And I'm like, if he knew I was having a live stream right now, then he wouldn't be texting me. I'm like, so I'm like, oh, like, I don't, if he doesn't watch my channel, that's fine with me. I'm like, okay, fine. My not all my friends actually care about ocean liners and stuff, so they're not always watching. But I get mad when my friends are like, oh yeah, I love your channel, and then they never watch anything on my channel. I'm like, how can you love my channel if you don't watch anything? So here he is texting me right now, and yet he's always telling me, he's like, oh yeah, I watch your channel. I'm like, no, you don't. Let's go for a jog. We'll just run around the promenade. So, King of Battleships, if you're still around, you were asking the other day about, you know, uh, something about the steel plates and the riveting and stuff like that, and how, because I was talking about how the thicker steel plates were designed to prevent the ship from bending. It was to keep the ship more rigid. And you were saying something along the lines of, well, but I thought flexing was very important when the ship was cresting huge swells. And I was telling you that's what these expansion joints were for. The expansion joints were designed to be a specifically engineered way to allow the ship to flex, uh, and yet still retain its strength. So that's what the expansion joints were for. And Titanic had 3 of them, and so did Queen Mary. Queen Mary has 3 expansion joints. Although I wouldn't trust the Queen Mary expanding out at sea today if she were like being towed through a storm. Like, I wouldn't trust those expansion joints anymore. They'd probably crack the ship in half. Right, Tupiep says Royal Mail are now losing so much money they want to go to a 3-day a week service. Oh my gosh. See, that's bad management right there. Because if you can have companies like UPS and FedEx and Amazon, if they can have their own shipping services and be fine, there's no reason why the Royal Mail can't do fine as well. That's poor management quality. That's people who don't know what they're doing and assume that they know what they're doing. And it's just like, if other people do it so well, why can't you? You know? All right. Well, folks, I think I'm going to end the live stream now because even though we have a lot of viewers, we have 52 people watching at this moment, which is pretty good for a live stream. I don't really know what else to show you guys. I mean, there's little things here and there, but yeah, we've been here for 3 hours already because I started at 1 and it's about to be 4. So it's been a while. But yeah. Already Kevin's like, bye. All right, folks. Well, I guess I'll end it here then. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. I know it's been a while since I did a live stream, and that was just mainly because there's just a lot of stuff going on. It's not just bad stuff; it's good stuff too. Like, I was working on the website and stuff like that, and I was working on the Queen Mary tour video for a long time. So I just, I was finishing up a lot of things, but I also just, at the same time, it wasn't a good time to do any kind of live streams. I don't know when the tea times will be back. I don't have any plans to bring them back for the foreseeable future. But doing these live streams with Titanic Honor and Glory, and then maybe the what do you call it? Disneyland Railroad Simulator, that kind of thing. I can see myself doing that. I'm going to try to put out more videos in general on the channel in the coming weeks. So we'll see how all that goes. But yeah, thanks everybody so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.